Okay, perfect. So, what? They started recording on their end, so I said perfect. All right, so quick recap so far is that there's a lot of pollution in the Minnesota River. The honeydew spill and a big oil spill led to the MPCA creation. In the Minnesota River Basin, we have a ton of impairments for everything from TSS to biology and all that jazz. Lots of ag land use in the basin, and now Emma is up to talking about the most visible source of pollution. Also, okay.
So the most visible source of pollution in the Minnesota River is sediment. This piece of the puzzle is visible in lake cores taken from Lake Pepin. This data is taken, shown on the screen, is from 2019 from Engstrom and colleagues, who were studying historical changes of sediment and phosphorus in the upper Mississippi River. It shows that while, yes, Minnesota is always the Minnesota River in the geologic record, has always been a larger source of sediment than the Mississippi and St. Croix. Since industrialization and increase of farming, the contribution is about 5 times greater. This study eventually led to the Collaboration for Sediment Source Reduction. This collaborative research effort was focused on reducing sediment reaching the Minnesota River. They found that the majority of sediment currently reaching the river is from bluffs, not from upland farm fields. All the previous efforts to reduce field erosion through buffers, while effective, is not going to stop this sediment problem. It is the larger above-river base flow events throughout the year that are eroding large sections of riverbanks, which we can see in documents. The collaboration consensus was that increasing storage in the uplands region of the basin is most effective at reducing sediment pollution. They also created a model that provides a cost-benefit analysis for several BMPs and any that are tied to or in conjunction with water storage. They found that in the long term, water storage is most cost-effective for reducing sediment. This consensus was reached in 2017, and the Water Resources Center started doing more research into water storage as a conservation practice after this study. Another major benefit of water storage that we've looked into is reduction of peak flows and flooding downstream. So when water storage practices are placed in strategic locations, they can help reduce peak flows. This shows a time series map created for the River Park Drive sub-watershed off of the Lasore River, where water storage placed in the yellow and orange regions will help reduce flows at the outflow of the subshed. Any area in the green is too close to the outflow to be effective for flow reduction benefits of water source practices. Another benefit is increasing habitat for many species. In wetlands, two-stage ditch systems, rain gardens, and more, various species can benefit from plants that grow and the literal extra water in water storage locations. Along with sediment, there is potential to reduce the other 2 major pollutants. As we know, reduction in phosphorus is tied to reduction in sediment, but nitrogen is not as directly tied. However, nitrogen has the potential to be reduced in several water storage practices. Wetlands have documented a reduction in nitrogen with the use of plants, as well as nitrogen bioreactors. Those can be considered water storage practice as they hold water back for hours to days for the reactor to work properly to reduce nitrogen. Another documented benefit of water storage is drought resilience. Whether the stored water is literally used for irrigation during drier seasons and as sort of like a water tank, or if it is through soil health practices where a healthier soil shows to have less runoff after rain events because aggregates in the soil can trap moisture for future use. At the Water Resources Center in Mankato, we researched all of these benefits that could help improve the Minnesota River, and realized that wasn't necessarily common or widespread information throughout the basin. We knew that there hadn't yet been one event or a hub of information solely focused on water storage. So we wanted to create an event that highlights the practicality and cost benefits of water storage practices. Thus, the Water Storage Forum was created. While we knew the practical benefits of water storage, we wanted to bring in different viewpoints to make sure we weren't missing something essential to the equation. So there were conservation and citizen groups, research and state agencies represented in the steering committee, where we wanted to know from them what they thought people wanted to know about water storage. So the steering committee came up with 3 essential questions about water storage that had to be represented. Why is water storage important? What is water storage? And how can it be implemented throughout the region? It was determined that a good citizen testimonial of increased river flows and research about historic to present hydrologic conditions were the best way for people to understand why water storage is a good conservation practice. Another necessary part of the day had to define what is a potential water storage practice through various time scales and spatial scales. And lastly, there had to be local representation of where these practices were being implemented, so people can't just go, well, that works in that region, but not in our region. So this is what the day ended up looking like. I'm just going to go through each one briefly. Dr. Blumenfeld from the DNR Climatology Office explained that climate trends in Minnesota, how it is getting wetter and warmer, especially in the last several decades, but it will also continue to do so. Minnesota is expected to have more frequent heavy rains in the summer, and we currently can't handle the volume in the rivers, and these increasing rains won't help that issue get any better. Then Dr. Gran from the University of Minnesota Duluth gave a hydrological perspective of the issues. Because the geology of the area, we have increased risk of sediment pollution, but sediment pollution is in part because of increasing water volumes, specifically below crucial nick points, where terrain moves from uplands to the bluffs. In this area is where rivers drain the Minnesota River Basin, that much of the bluff erosion is occurring. And by decoupling the rain from the river flow with increased water storage, we can slow the flow below these nick points. Dr. Gran also went into more research behind the scissor collaboration and the full extent of consensus. Then next, Alpine from Bowser talks about the crucial question of what is water storage. He has worked on this problem in the Red River Basin for many years and realizes how it can be applied to the Minnesota River Basin. He went over various water storage conservation practices and how they could be tailored to specific locations and field conditions, from larger reservoirs to small-scale field stabilization structures and ditch modifications, to wetland restorations and urban practices such as rain gardens. He emphasized that no matter where you are, large to small, rural to urban, there are practices that can be tailored to each location, and every person can play a small role in increasing water storage throughout the entire basin. Then in the second half of the day, the focus switched to implementation. Oh, it's getting kind of like caught up. The PowerPoint. Then in the second half of the day, the focus switched to implementation of water storage practices. Marissa and Dustin from Faribault County Drainage Team came to talk about a ditch improvement project that had early input from the SWCD office, where they were able to integrate a wetland restoration into the scope of a ditch improvement. They focused on some of the great things they had accomplished, how they were able to work with the SWCD combined into one office space, and the challenges of completing projects in their region. Then Carrie Nefsky, the Executive Director for Area 2 and RCRCA, talked about how they were able to complete water retention projects in her area that covers the southern side of the Minnesota River. They've been able to work with MnDOT and townships in the area to complete road retentions as a water storage practice. So they reduce and update culverts beneath roads to create temporary water storage after rain events, where the area can be farmed when not flooded. They also have placed reservoirs in higher regions of the basin as larger water storage practice. Then the one expert from outside of the Minnesota River Basin was Cody Fox, who talked about the Cedar River Watershed District and how they have leveraged a capital improvement project with Hormel to implement water storage practices throughout their watershed. They have many different projects going on, and this is their projected map for the area that will have controlled flow to the Cedar River by the end of the year, by the end of this year, which is pretty neat. Got a decent sized area. And then last of the day, Jennifer Hahn from Redwood SWCD and the new coordinator for the Minnesota Soil Health Coalition spoke about how soil health can also improve water storage. Numbers on exactly how much water storage improves with soil health vary, but there are many anecdotal accounts of reduced runoff and gully formation from fields with varying soil health practices. This is one of the water storage practices that can be most widespread, moving in the future based on the agricultural land use of the basin. So moving on to who attended the forum, it was mostly government employees, varying from departments and regions in the basin. Also in attendance were representatives from watershed districts, conservation groups, universities, engineering firms, and a small portion of landowners in the area. From this varying pool, we had a little over 50% response rate from evaluations handed out to help shape future events. Among others, the main questions from the evaluations were, what was the most important takeaway from the event, what are potential future topics to be covered, and how information should be given in the future, and any priority actions that should be taken related to water storage. From those evaluations, we learned that people really enjoy the background information portion of the event and understanding why we are asking people to put water storage practices on their land. They also like learning about the variety of storage practices and how each can be tailored to a specific location, and that it isn't just a rural solution. There are practices that can be implemented in urban areas as well. And while soil health wasn't a large focus of the day, people were interested to know that it can also play a part towards water storage. As for future projects, people wanted to know about the various practices, or future topics, people wanted to know more about the various practices available and how different funding sources can be leveraged to pay for those water storage practices. People found that the landowner perspective was missing, and how a landowner might like or dislike how practices are implemented on their land. And then one comment noted how we focus on the positives of water storage, but not how different practices can potentially have more negatives in a specific location than benefits. Most of the comments on information flow were to continue having a regional single-day event that summarizes what's happening in the area during that year. Along with an event, people also wanted to see an online presence, which I'll talk about in just a bit, and more informal, smaller events, potentially partnering with soil health cafe chats and farm tours. Some of the priority actions people saw moving forward were dedicated funding for water storage and legislation support to back it up. We found out recently that water storage has made the list of priorities for the new subcommittee on Minnesota water policy, which is pretty cool. And along with these larger priorities, people also wanted to see increased focus on getting information to the general public and using public health benefits to do so. So using this feedback, we think these steps will be some of the best ways to continue momentum for water storage in the region. First is to support the local SWCD offices in their water storage implementation efforts. They're literally on the front line with landowners and are considered a little bit more trustworthy compared to larger state agencies. Based on our interactions with landowners and research done through the University of Minnesota Center for Changing Landscapes, landowners in Minnesota trust local SWCD offices way more than MDNR and MDNR, as well as environmental groups. So we think more of the smaller informational events should be run by them with support from our office and others. Then there already exists support for water storage practices being built into current One Watershed, One plans. But we just want to make sure that that continues to be a focus in the plans to be written in the coming years, especially considering that's likely how some of these practices will be funded. And then finally, I'm creating a regional resource online that will be built into the Minnesota River Basin Data Center run through the Water Resources Center here in Mankato. The website is to go up within the next week and is meant for general public in the area, but it can also serve as a starting point for anyone looking into water storage. It will have a focus on multiple benefits of water storage, the potential funding and implementation resources for various practices, as well as local case studies where someone can contact the person who has implemented a project and gain insights for future projects. This website already houses information directly from the Water Storage Forum and will show any events in the future related to this project. And that is all I have. Any questions?
All right, so I will stop sharing and we will open it up to any questions that you have.
I got a couple.
Let me make sure you guys hear us now? Okay, perfect.
Okay. Hi, thanks for the presentation. This is Glenn Scuda, the Watershed Division Director at PCA. So on your one slide, there was a mention of tying this issue to public health. Could you maybe describe what that connection might be?
A lot of the stuff we have looked into is turning water storage into more of a wellhead protection issue or groundwater drinking water preservation. So just creating those infiltration areas is also considered a water storage practice.
Got it, thank you. The other one, on one of your slides, talked about legislative changes that could help support water storage. This is the time right now as we're coming into a legislative policy session where ideas are being gathered and vetted. So I'd be really interested in any particular legislative initiative type ideas, policy directives, whatever that has come out of this work.
Yeah, I think the biggest one we've seen is citizen action group trying to get direct funding for water storage in the Minnesota River Basin with the Minnesota River Congress. And then other than that, I'm not aware of too many others. I don't know if Kim knows of any, but that and the One Watershed, One plan that I know that are putting water storage as a priority as well.
We were just encouraged to see that there was a water storage mentioned in the legislative water commission meeting the other day. Like they're trying to support their priorities. It was exciting to see water storage as firmly the top of one of their priorities. Yeah, so we do have, this is Kim Musser from the Water Resources Center at MSU. She came to support Emma.
But it also goes for some of the stuff that we've learned in a lot of the watershed work that we've done, where it's flexibility in the programs. Eligible and available to get funding quicker, faster, with less red tape.
Yeah.
There's too many rules and people are too afraid to try it with the rules that are there. adjust those rules to make it more that people can try something, that they're not locked into 3 years to doing something remote.
Yeah,
I was just gonna go off that and just say that also making sure the language of water storage doesn't just include specific practices, but it's more open, and interpretive. Otherwise, people are gonna get locked into certain things, potentially not be able to do something when they can do something else that's not in that definition.
And consider wetlands as a form of water.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of water storage that, you know, we haven't even thought of, like ways to keep water where it lands, and it doesn't just have to be a big basin. That's not the best way to hold water back.
Yeah, I'd echo what Kim said. I was at that same Legislative Water Commission workshop Tuesday afternoon. I was in the small group that we were vetting various ideas, and I was in the group that talked about storage, and that got a lot of support from the group we were in. I was really trying to advance that too. And earlier that day, the Legislative Water Commission had presentations from various folks, including Katrina Kessler and myself, about all the reports we've got on public notice right now in the Minnesota River Basin. And in the conversation or the question answer session with the senators and representatives, storage was raised primarily actually by Representative Torkelson, who was really making the point that, as your graph showed, the total amount of precipitation has really been going up, and that farmers are, you know, struggling to deal with that increased volume of water. And he was really saying we need to get more storage on the land. So I think, you know, someone like him has got a lot of sway in the legislature, and particularly in things related to agricultural issues. And so this could be a time where, if there are, beyond the funding, which, as you're pointing out, is very important, flexibility that comes along with that. But if there are other ideas, you know, not right now, but, you know, that you have about policy initiatives or things like that that could also advance the cause, please let me know as soon as possible.
I have a question. Were there any people in attendance who were against the idea of adding water storage?
There was one. Yeah, just one person. I mean, did you want to know anything specific about that, or?
Well, what were the negatives that were mentioned?
That was more a comment from, like DNR representatives on fish habitat and aquatic species, that some of the water storage practices aren't necessarily great for those ecosystems. So just making sure those are taken into consideration while you're putting in new practices as well. And again, there might be some other negatives out there, but that was more what I've been considering. Some of the other negatives, I guess, would just be potential overflooding, but I haven't heard that from anybody that's implemented a water storage practice. Anything negative on that end.
I have a question. Dave Wall, scientist in the Watershed Division. Did the forum and the water storage group here consider using any tools or models to quantify the amount of storage that can be accomplished, and then how that would have benefits to downstream effects, water quality, sediment, et cetera?
Yeah, there's a couple models out there. PTM app is a big one, and then ACTF also has some water storage built in to those models, but they're run, as far as I know, just watershed to watershed. Running out in the entire Minnesota River Basin would take a lot of time that we haven't really been paid to do yet. So hopefully we'll get to each watershed to be able to do those, but some of them do exist out there for specific watersheds in the area.
Thanks.
I have a question. So I'm Lori Silva. I coordinate the Citizen Stream Monitoring Program for the agency, and I'm curious how, or if you guys have thought about how you might go forward with the recommendation to reach the general public and engage landowners more. It looks like you had some pretty heavy hitters for speakers, which is great this year, but I'm just wondering if you've thought about how you might engage different sorts of people and how you might go about that.
Yeah, I've actually been talking about this with Michelle Stintman and the Faribault SWCD, and she and I have been talking, and I think it's more just making local people experts in their own right, so making sure SWCD employees or local MTCA DNR offices have that information so that they can be a representative for that conservation practice, so they don't have to call in somebody from up in the city to come talk about them. But then also making sure that you have someone local who's implemented one of these practices, whether it's even just soil health, because that's a lot what's going on in our area, to talk about the practices, so people can see that there's someone local in their area also doing it.
And we're doing some of that work in our RAPS work too, where we're trying to get the local partners more interested and understanding of our programs and the work that we're doing. We've had kids do a lot of it, and a lot of the work that we've done, civic engagement wise, has been through MSU. So we're trying to do things in different ways with the other sources of money that we have.
I just wanted to interject that we're so grateful that Emma decided to step her service. You're working on this issue in this area. As you can tell, she's really competent, articulate, hardworking person, and for her to aggregate all this, it's not a funded project. This is a dream that we had to try to clarify what is water storage, and it grew out of our need of lots of discussions with landowners, lots of conservation partners. We kept talking about water storage, water storage, and a lot of questions about what exactly is water storage and all its diversity of practices and diversity of ways to implement on the land. So I just wanted to give a huge shout out to Emma and thank her for developing this resource. We don't have funding to continue this work moving forward, but we're trying to communicate. I think it's really important.
Yeah, I was wondering, Emma, I think you're our last GreenCorps member to present at the Water Issues Talk. I was wondering if maybe you want to just share a little bit about kind of your experience and maybe what your plans are now that your service is over.
Sure. Well, it's been great. I love getting to know a lot of people in this office here in Mankato, but then also just being involved in a lot of the water issues in the area, going to a ton of meetings. It's been really fun. I really enjoy water issues, so it was nice to come talk today. I guess just applying to state agencies, don't have anything set in stone yet for the future, but we'll see. Hoping to keep working in the area, but
Yeah. She's got a couple interviews coming up, so wish her luck, and if you're a supervisor, keep your eye out for her resume coming through the system, because it'd be nice if we could amp her up. She also got to go do some stream monitoring work, so we tried to get her kind of as involved as we could in the different things about water in the area during her service here. So she went out with Van Bunkor, she's over here, and did some water monitoring, and hung out and talked a lot about different water issues in her basin. So
a lot of water.
yeah, and Emma has a undergrad degree from the University of Minnesota in geology, and then her master's from Temple in geology as well. She looked at gravity on glaciers in Alaska, so she's got some interesting background knowledge to share too. Any other questions? We still have another 15 minutes or so.
I have a couple.
All right, make sure we're talking up in Mankato.
Yeah, I understand a little difficulty hearing. So my questions are, first, in terms of the why, we talked about the talk about water storage should continue sort of, to what extent should climate change be foundational in talking about water storage?
So, I don't know how much you guys heard, but, the first question was about, the Wisconskis, and they're part of the why. I sort of skipped over it. They were on the agenda slide. But they're two local citizens, Don and Becky Wiskonski, who their house is slowly falling into, I think it's the Lasore River.
Slowly.
Yeah, yeah. In the past decade even, they lost about 100 feet of yard in their backyard, and the river is very close to their house. So they came in and spoke about how these higher flows and flooding events are impacting them. And that's a big part of the why, at least here in Mankato, is that these issues aren't just affecting, like, they're not potentially specifically causing these effects, but they're being affected anyway. So that's a big part for people in the basin to realize that each person can do one little thing and it'll make a big difference. And then the other question was about climate change and how much that should be part of the discussion about water storage. And I think specifically for the water storage forum, we decided that just to treat it as a fact, and that having that talk about the climate at the beginning of the day was to just sort of set the stage, and that no matter what is happening, it is getting wetter and warmer in Minnesota, so there is going to be more water. We didn't want to make it too much part of the discussion, if only because a lot of people in this area, it's not the best topic to bring up. So we sort of left it at that, but it's definitely part of the conversation we want to have moving forward, and that is why it's getting wetter and warmer. But when you're talking to every person, it might not be the reason why they want to put a conservation practice on the land. It's one of the things I really care about, but just getting those other things that people are really interested in to the discussion is pretty important as well. Any other questions?
Anyone from?
We have another question here in St. Paul.
Yeah, more or less a comment, kind of affirming what Emma just said. I think that, like the example I gave of Representative Torkelson, you know, a farmer, a Republican, he was the one that brought up, we had way more precipitation, way more water than we used to have in the Minnesota River Basin. I feel like he may have even used the term climate, but I can't remember right now. But I think, you know, it's part of knowing your audience, which sounds like it's exactly what you did, is you focused on that fact, and you don't have to tie it to global climate change, or, you know, something that people are going to maybe push back against or is going to make them shut down. Because, I don't know, at least what I hear in all the conversations I'm in, I never hear anybody saying, oh, we're not getting more precipitation. That's not true. I mean, it seems like everybody accepts the fact that it is getting wetter. Why it's getting wetter, if it's part of a bigger, that's another step, and you know, we don't always have to go there depending on the audience who's engaged. When you are with the audience that is engaged in that, like, you know, this governor's office, this commissioner's office, this administration, climate change is front and center, and when speaking with that group, to emphasize that this is one of those impacts of climate change that is having this type of an impact in this basin, on this river, on these people, you know, that just bolsters it all the more. But I think that's smart the way you described it, of just stick with the facts that are necessary for the moment in time and the audience that you're speaking to, so you're more effective in making.
Okay. Questions from sitting at your, like, the people sitting at their desk? Unmute yourself and ask. Give them a little chance to jump in.
That's good time. Very entertaining. Oh, all right. Well, I think that wraps up. Thank you, Eileen, for helping out with running the WebEx meeting. I We appreciate your assistance. I'm gonna stop recording it, and I will have the recording available on the Water Issues YouTube site, one of these days when I have time. But thank you for presenting, Emma, and good luck in your future endeavors. And we'll hopefully see you guys soon.
And I'll send the links for the water storage form out to the water issues, list at the agencies, you guys have them too.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Nice job.
Thank you, Emma.